So if you want, we can go ahead and just you could just go ahead and do like an introduction of yourself, of who you are, and what your outlook is on like the prison system.
Okay. Yes. Hello. My name is James Atkinson the fourth, and I'm currently running for the Democratic nomination for governor of Oregon. A little bit about myself is that uh, I was in sales for about 20 years, doing a variety of different types of sales up until about 2 years ago. During that entire sales career, I've been wanting to be an inventor, which I then accomplished um, approximately 2 years ago. And at that point, that invention, which was an anti-drowning device, I decided to run for mayor of Portland in 2024 election. And as that completed, uh, I then had to decide where I wanted to go in terms of continuing what I've been trying to accomplish. Um, and approximately, say about a year ago, um, I was able to start to finalize my second invention, which is one of the reasons I've experienced to run in this race, and that is called, just in very brief terms, called the Endless Cup. It uses a combination of factors that already existed to create droplets of water over a time frame. And I believe that that has the capability to very soon start to alleviate and ultimately end the water crisis in our state. With that invention, I wanted to show the constituents of Oregon that there can be an end to an issue. You don't have to endlessly fight against each other, depending on a letter that we vote for. It should be, number one, that everyone is a leader in the state. And I believe we all agree on one thing, but we get separated and we start to blame one another. So that is why I decided to run for governor. And another reason that was important to me was the prison system and the effects it has on society as a whole. Um, I was able to talk with police officers, formerly incarcerated folks during my mayoral campaign throughout Portland, uh, government employees, to get their perspective on what they think issues are. And I started to see a correlation. And again, if everyone can agree on one thing, then we can actually move forward and start to end the recidivism that happens as a result of entering the prison system. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about today.
Okay, sounds good to me. I appreciate the background and your acknowledgement of the prison system and the recidivism uh, rate within prisons. So we did come up with a list of questions, and we'll go through them. If we don't get them all, then we'll come up with something else to get all the answers that people are wanting. So the main one that comes to mind from people is uh, medical and the deaths within DOC. So what is your plan to deal with or address those top two issues within DOC?
Yeah. And I apologize to touch hard here. You said the aspect of the medical issues with the DOC. Is that correct?
Yeah. So your plans to deal with medical, and then
Oh,
address the in custody deaths.
yes. That's a great question. And I believe that the uh, medical issues that folks face while in prison are extensive. And uh, we are not concentrating enough on what causes uh, complex medical issue. Um, there are a variety of situations where we are looking forward and looking at long-term health issues as opposed to the early stages, preventive care. Um, and when we do that, we're not only spending more money in the long run, but it is leading to more of a negative effect on both ends, both for the person in custody and the staff members. And if we look at it in a way where we concentrate on things like early screenings, expanding telehealth, concentrating on community-based medical treatments, that I believe will alleviate a lot of the bigger complex issues that arise when we don't concentrate on those things and we react. We are what I believe reacting to situations as opposed to trying to prevent situations that collectively occur, which leads to the question about the in custody deaths, which, of course, anytime that occurs, that is um, catastrophic. It's awful. And it needs to be addressed um, in terms of, again, talking about those preventative efforts upfront, early access to that care. Um, that is a main factor in deaths that occur in the prison system. And holding those people, holding people accountable if there is an issue that arises for that death, and ultimately getting that number down, hopefully to zero one day.
Yeah. So with that, do you believe DOC should release the cause of death of the individuals that pass away in their custody?
I don't see any reason why we should not do that. Um, and I want to be clear that I am certain that there are some instances where the cause of death might be prolonged and being released or reviewed for a variety of reasons. But I don't see overall how that is uh, going to be an issue to release information like that. It's done with any other type of situation, any other person that is um, deceased, we automatically know the cause of death. So I'm not sure why that should be any different. Because
Okay.
again, everyone's a person.
Yeah. And well, and the thing is DOC doesn't, since I've been doing the advocacy work since 2023, I've never seen DOC release a cause of death unless you file public records and ask them. And then, you have to pay for that and log you. So I just think it'd be a best practice for DOC so that the general public knows what's going on and can get a grasp of why this person died. If it was due to drugs, like, sometimes they say it could be, or to suicide or whichever, but nobody knows unless they file for public records to see why such a person passed away.
Right. And, I would say, removing a lot of those barriers, uh, shouldn't be a massive issue. And again, I want to be clear. There can be reasons why I can see that might happen, but it shouldn't be a blanket type of decision where, you, as you said, you have to request and go through a lot of different steps and go through all those difficulties to find out the cause of death of an individual. If something did arise, then an additional safeguard needed to be put in place for a reason to prevent the release, then that can be talked about. But generally, there shouldn't be a uh, blanket method of just having to request every single uh, instance of their cause of death. Doesn't really add up a lot.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on. So, will you commit to eliminating retaliatory lockdowns, collective punishment, and long-term isolation practices?
Uh, yeah, I think that that is a vital issue. And when we look at the prison system as a whole, there's a lot of individual factors that come into play and to ultimately decrease mental health, um, higher chance of reentry. And lockdowns should be because of a safety concern, not as a form of punishment. Um, if there is a risk safety to staff or other folks inside that system, then a lockdown is understandable because you don't want further crimes to occur. However, if it's used as a method of punishment, we already know through endless amounts of studies that it decreases mental health. It creates a sense of isolation where they're released. When they're released back into the main population of the jail, they're most likely not better off as a result, which leads to further issues down the road. So I would, yes.
Will you commit to looking at clemency paperwork and actually approving the ones that should be let out? So this one's a big one due to the fact we just had a recent thing with an individual that was released on clemency under Kate Brown. And there's people say, well, clemency is not good because the person didn't complete their sentence, which in my eyes is if you are showing that you are rehabilitated and the government went through all the appropriate steps to approve your clemency, then your sentence should be technically completed. But people are saying online, oh, it's not completed because you didn't go till your actual release date that the courts put in place.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, as governor, I would absolutely use review clemency petitions. Uh, Again, it goes to the core of our state constitution, where there's a reason why it should be an option. Those that are elderly, that have been rehabilitated, um, especially nonviolent offenders, should absolutely have their overall case and overall time looked at. And that is honestly a huge cost-effective tool because if we are continuing to pay money to have folks that have gone through a system that was meant to rehabilitate, and then after they have shown rehabilitation behaviors to continue to punish them, then it's just punishment. If we're using punishment in rehabilitation in the same sentence, then the governor should act accordingly. So that's what I would.
Yeah. Would you be willing to look into Measure 11 and implementing good time for first time offenders and non murders?
Yeah, absolutely. I would look into Measure 11. When we saw that passed in 1994, originally it was primarily meant for, or at least the idea was, to keep folks that were extremely dangerous, a threat to the public, uh, housed in the prison. Uh, where now we have minimums for a lot of different offenses. And I think that that's not necessarily needed. Again, the big issue with the overall prison system is that we're always out of money. And yet we take measures that cost far more money and does not deliver an adequate result. If we just look at punishment as a multi-year to lifetime punishment for something that occurred, then honestly, what's the point of punishment? There's the difference in punishment and rehabilitation. And I think we group everything into a category, and we're now looking at the individual situation. When we took that out of the judge's hands, we forced overcrowding in these prisons, which led to more money, which led to us being broke, which led to further issues. It's just the endless cycle, which needs to be addressed.
So, with that, with the Measure 11, so Kevin Mannix is the main writer of that bill. And he's also on the Oregon Advisory Board for Oregon Correctional Enterprise, which is the prison industrial complex. Do you believe that's a conflict of interest?
I couldn't hear the entire question. You're saying that Kevin Mannix, so sorry,
Yeah.
it's hard to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. So Kevin Mannix is the main bill writer for Measure
Mm-hmm.
11. But he's
Right.
also on the Oregon Correctional Enterprise Advisory Council. Do you think that's a conflict of interest because he writes the bills that are putting people in prison?
To me, that's um, a question that would look at my personal opinion and put it as a blanket statement of what I believe for the system. Um, I think that folks are in uh, different positions for a number of reasons. And going beyond that, if we have more independent boards, transparency to address the core issues, which one of them is what we talked about in Measure 11. That is ultimately what needs to be done to alleviate the issues that occur in the prison system. Um, I'm not trying to sidestep the question or anything like that, but in terms of what the core issue is, that's what I try to mainly focus on. Um, and having those boards, having um, transparency to review practices that ultimately lead to cycling back into prison is what I look at primarily.
Okay. So what investments will you make to prevent people from entering the criminal justice system due to unmet behavioral health needs?
Due to unmet,
Uh, Behavioral health, so like mental health needs.
and you're saying before they enter the system, what would I do? From
Yeah, so what investments will you make to prevent people from entering the criminal justice system due to unmet behavioral health issues or needs?
okay, okay, uh, just didn't hear the entire question. Yes, you know, I think that mental health is a um, priority, um, and I would say that in a lot of ways, what I talked about earlier um, about preventive health care that needs to be done across the board. It's actually part of my broader healthcare plan, which is for another discussion, at another time. But um, I strongly believe that that needs to be addressed. We need to look at the results that happen when folks are not getting, um, think that they generally need. I think it adds to the problem, and that is a concern of
What specific barriers to reentry, housing, employment, healthcare, will you prioritize removing?